Today we're going to be looking at plotting and finding coordinates. But before I show you how to do that, let's break down the three words that you see here. So the first one is coordinates. So what are coordinates? Well, coordinates are ordered pairs of numbers. Ordered pairs of numbers, and usually they are written like this: x, comma, y in brackets, and you'll get to see why they're written like that a little bit later on. Plotting, in this instance, plotting means to put down or to place. So when we're talking about plotting, we're drawing it, we're placing it, we're putting it onto our grid, which you'll find out a bit later on. And obviously everyone knows that finding is to identify or to discover. So today we're plotting and finding coordinates. So we're putting down, we're identifying ordered pairs of numbers. When we plot coordinates, we need to understand the grid that we're using. So before I show it to you, I'm going to tell you a little story about how this grid came into existence, I suppose. And it was invented by a French mathematician called Rene Descartes. And he was basically lying down on his bed one day and was looking up at his ceiling, and he saw a fly, and it was moving from points in the ceiling, and he had this thought about, wouldn't it be good to be able to come up with a system that would be able to tell someone the position of the fly in relation to his ceiling by just giving a set of numbers, and people can go, yep, I know that the fly is there. So what he basically did was, and if you can see this box here, this box represents his ceiling as he's looking at it. And so he thought, if he put a point in right in the middle, and from that he came up with two axes, and we know that these axes are called x, the horizontal one, and the vertical one is called y axis. So he came up with this particular grid, and he thought, well, that's a start, but then he had to find out, well, how do we work out the numbers using this coordinate method? So what he did was, the middle he knew as 0 would be a 0, but not only 0 on its own. That particular point, and I'll write it up at the top, is 0 on the x-axis, but it is also 0 on the y-axis. So that's why that point in the middle there is 0, 0. But then he thought, well, how am I going to work the rest of it out? So what he did was, just like a number line, he came up with his lines a bit like that, on either side, and up and down, and he came up with these 4 areas that are called quadrants. Now, you have basically been plotting coordinates on a area, but you normally use this quadrant up in the top right hand side, and that's called the first quadrant. And so what happens there, and if you can see that you've got, if we number these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the y-axis 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, both sides are positive. So in quadrant 1, you're only dealing with positive numbers. So if we have, say, the fly was here, then we know that that position there would be, so I've got my brackets, I've got my comma in the middle. So we do the x-axis first and then the y-axis. So x-axis is 5, because there it is there. And then we look at the y-axis, and then we can see the 1. So that particular point has a coordinates of 5, 1. So if the fly went in quadrant 1, we'd always see positive numbers in those brackets. But as the fly moves around, and if it moves to the left-hand side, and say it, or let's say down, we'll go in order. So the fly moved down to about there. This is called the second quadrant. And if we want to find out its place, we look at the x-axis first. So here we have the 2. But the y-axis now is going to be in negatives. So if we have a look at -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5, we know the y-axis, there's my dot, is in -4, and we end the bracket there as well. So the second quadrant has a positive number because x is still in positive, but it also has a negative number because y is in negative. If we move over to quadrant 3, then what we tend to have, and say our fly moves again, and this time it moves to here, then what we do is we know our y-axis is in negative, but our x-axis has to be in negative as well. So -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, and -6. Let's go and find where it is. We're identifying it. So here, x first. X, we've got -2. And y is also -2 there. So that particular dot is in x -2, y -2. So in quadrant 3, we get a negative x-axis point and a negative y-axis point as well. And then the last quadrant, quadrant 4, our fly moves up. Now it's right up the top there. X-axis first, we've got -1, and y-axis is a +5. So in the fourth quadrant, we have a negative x point and a positive y point. Now today you'll also be given a point and you'll have to plot that. So if we're given 3, 2, then we have to find where that is. And remember, x-axis first, 3, and then, so it's 3 across to the right and 2 up will get us there. That is our 3, 2 point. And we'll also get instructions that say something like you need to move that dot 3 places down and 5 places to the left. So then what you have to do is find its new coordinates. And so then we just go through the process. We need to move 3 down. So we start on our dot and we go 1, 2, 3 down, and we end up at -1 for the y part. But let's find the x now by moving 5 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my new point now is there. And remember, we always put the x-axis first, -2, and the y-axis was -1. So my new coordinates are -2, -1. Give the worksheet a go. If you get stuck, come and see me on the meet. Work hard, and I'll see you guys a little bit later.